Hello, happy people. Hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at the novel The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, which was published in 1896. It's between his two probably better known novels, The Time Machine in 1985 and The War of the Worlds in 97. Both of these are like more than 120 years old. So it's fun going back and reading it and getting an opportunity to sort of be engaged with it. The first novel I ever read by H.G. Wells was when I was in junior high in southern West Virginia. I picked up War of the Worlds from a book fair that was coming around to each of our schools. I enjoyed it, read it I think in probably 8th grade. And then the next year I read The Time Machine, which I picked up from a local bookstore, used bookstore rather, in Charleston, West Virginia, and I read that when I was in 9th grade. And then I didn't read anything else by H.G. Wells for a while. I got pulled into other directions by other writers and other passion projects, so I never ended up reading anything else. In college, I picked up a short story collection, and with a couple of novellas, and knocked that out, called Empire of the Ants, from a local bookstore in Morgantown, West Virginia at WVU, and then that was the last thing I read by H.G. Wells that was new until I picked up a copy for this channel of all of his collected short stories. And then I read a bunch of them and did some reviews for you from those collections. Recently, I went back and read The Time Machine and The War of the Worlds for the channel, which was something fun to go back and reread it for the first time as an adult, and to come back into it, as somebody who's 45 now. And come back to this stuff fresh and new, and it's interesting to me. But this novel I've actually never read before, so I wanted to knock it out too, since I was still sort of in an H.G. Wells mood. So I said, let's knock out The Island of Dr. Moreau, which I've never actually read. So that'll be fun to do for you. I knocked it out over 3 days. It's 103 pages long in this book collection, and there's a 2-page prelude. That's unnumbered, so it's about 105 pages total. I did 35 pages a day, so that it took me 3 days, and each of those was about an hour and 10 minutes, maybe an hour and 15 minutes sometimes, so probably between an hour and a half, 3.5 hours and 3 hours and 45 minutes, all told, for me to knock out this novel for the first time. H.G. Wells, this collection. I'll link you to it in the comments below. I'll also link you to a free version online since it's past its copyright date. And this H.G. Wells, as somebody who wrote, back in the 1800s, is a little bit of a denser read. It takes more of my time to do it, and this is an overprinted version, obviously, with smaller print. So obviously, this is something that took more of my time to do and to really kind of spend time and knock out appropriately. Now, I'm sure that you're familiar with The Island of Dr. Moreau, the basic concept. If you're new to this channel, as a reminder, this channel is definitely, because this is a big name thing, this channel tends to focus on one of two types of reviews. The first are reviews of works that are just as good as classics, should still be read, should still be very appreciated, and that people have just forgotten about, or lesser known works by big name writers that nobody's ever really taken the time to really sort of, kind of do. Well, The Island of Dr. Moreau is something that's been heavily reviewed. It's obviously, it's probably H.G. Wells' third most popular novel after War of the Worlds and The Time Machine. Although, to be fair, Time Machine is more of a novella, but that's fine. I'm not going to have any major judgments here. But again, The Island of Dr. Moreau is definitely a famous thing. It's been reviewed. People have talked about it for ages. I certainly don't have a fresh take on it. But it is an opportunity for people that are coming to this channel new from these more famous works to get a chance to say, hey, look, I've done lots of H.G. Wells stuff, from his science fiction stuff, particularly his collection of short stories that I've reviewed for you pretty regularly for him, as well as now his third novel that I've reviewed for you too, and it's a lot of fun. I've also looked at other big name writers from the same time, like Jules Verne, or famous works by Saki, who was a famous horror writer who probably has about 3 or 4 horror short stories that are regularly reviewed. I've done a deep dive of him. I've also looked heavily at the Guy de Maupassant horror stuff that's also regularly not read or skipped past, even though it's pretty good. So again, that's kind of where this channel comes from and why I'm still reviewing sometimes the occasional classic if I'm in the mood for it, or if I've not read it yet, or coming back to it for the first time as an adult, to have sort of a fresh understanding as somebody in my mid-40s. But again, these sorts of reviews tend to not to be the more common style of review. I tend to review older things that have been forgotten, or pieces that have been by authors that have been remembered but have been forgotten. And that's fine. That's how things tend to be. So anyway, let's take a look at the Island of Dr. Moreau. Has been heavily read by people. It's been edited by people. It's been seen in a lot of things. You'll see it in comics, literally, as well as in comic forms, because it's past its copyright date, as well as it's impacted comics with stories. There was a JLA story in the early 2000s, the Justice League of America in DC Comics, where Dr. Moreau actually exists and creates an animal version of the Justice League, and stuff like that will happen. So this is a pretty influential piece of work by a lot of folks. So it's probably something that you're familiar with in the basic sort of concept, and I try to keep my reviews spoiler-free, even for something that was written in the 1800s and has been heavily read, in case you haven't read it like me. And you're coming to it from the first time. But the basic key concept early on that you'll find out is that this person who survived a shipwreck at sea, was going around on this dinghy for 8 days. He's rescued by this ship and a doctor on the ship, and the ship is heading to Dr. Moreau's island, an unnamed island in the Pacific areas. It feels like a tropical island from the descriptions. And the palm trees that are on it and that sort of thing. And so you're going to find the island of Dr. Moreau. And slowly over time, you're going to find out what Dr. Moreau is doing on this island, what dangers he exists on this island, and that sort of a thing. And you'll slowly come across those things over time. And so that's sort of the basic sort of premise, the shipwrecked person being brought to the island, even though he may not want to be. He's actually kicked off the boat that saved him because they don't like the people that they have worked for, and so they have kicked him off Dr. Moreau's island, even though his person who saved him says we're not taking him. But then they have fond feelings for him after he gets left out there with a dinghy ashore from the island, so they go and rescue him and bring him into the enclave. And from the enclave, obviously, some things will happen of a darker nature, and that's sort of the key concept of the island of Dr. Moreau. Now, there is something in here that happens, you'll find out very early on from the descriptions of people, that a lot of people have a darker description. Even somebody who's the attaché of our main character on the ship will have a darker descriptions to him, more animalistic in nature, and you'll learn early on that something's happening with animals and humans on this island. There is one thing in here that's probably a little bit unfortunate, considering the modern comings from this. As somebody in 2021, there is or 2022, if you read this, it's probably when it gets published as this review. And that is that there is a monkey creature who is turned into a black person. And since black people were regularly called monkeys and gorillas and apes and those sorts of simian things as a negative stereotype, and are regularly kind of seen as these beasts, turning one of those simian creatures into a black person is definitely somebody who resembles a black person is definitely not something that feels something that would happen in modern day storytelling, right? So just so you know, going in, if you're saying I've never read this novel, and so now maybe I won't, or maybe I still will. I still feel there's value in reading older things, but just going in with eyes wide open, just in case that is something that you're interested in, or if it's something you want to talk about more in the comments below. I'm happy to do that with you further later on after my review's over with. So anyway, but just to let you know, right up front, whenever something that happens in these stories isn't contemporary, I want to make sure that a contemporary audience that's coming to this fresh will understand. But I still think there's value. It's an impactful novel. It's probably his third biggest one. This is a guy who created and the idea of elevation of things. This is the first time it appears in fiction, and that's something that will happen regularly, and particularly in science fiction and speculative fiction. this idea of the elevation of a species, you know, from a scientific perspective. So this is something that's big. It happens a lot. Dr. Moreau has a big cast, and there's lots of movies that will reshoot this story and modernize it, or modern retellings or sequels. That are obviously, you know, were written by people that weren't named H.G. Wells. So this definitely happens. It's got a big imprint, and I'm giving it. It does have a lot of description, and the plots are fine, but it does have, you know, probably more description and conversation than it needs to have. So I'm probably going to be giving it maybe it's a classic, 7+. Do I round it up to an 8? Do I make it a 7? Let's keep it as a 7. It definitely has a lot more description than plot at times, and more conversations than, you know, plot at times between our three characters. So, you know, it's not to the novel's advantage. I feel it probably could have cut like 20 pages and been a sharper novel, or added more plot, and maybe another 10 pages and been a sharper novel. But there's a little bit too much description and dialogue and all stuff that happens in this story. And there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Have you read The Island of Dr. Moreau? If so, what did you think? Did you agree or disagree with my ideas or concepts of this in any way, or shape, or form? If so, I would be more than happy to engage you with it further in the comments below, whatever your take is. If you enjoyed this video, please feel encouraged to hit that subscribe button, because there's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day, investing it, and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.